Hello and welcome to Education Marketer Live. You've heard of content marketing and content strategy, but what about content design? It's the quietest of the content family. It may not have the mass following of something like content marketing, but that doesn't make it any less critical. Put simply, it's the workhorse of the content engine and a practice that is obsessed with placing user needs ahead of all else. But has it evolved since its inception in 2010? And what does it look like in 2023 to be a content designer? Joining me today for our live is Ching Koon and Nick Condon, both from the company Squiz. May is a CMO with an enviable background in CX and digital product development. And Nick has done his time on the front lines of digital government service design, publishing, and in higher ed. So both welcome to the show. Really good to have you. Nick, I must say, like, if you've done that time on the front lines in like government service design, it's good that you're still with us. I'm here.
Yeah, a couple of jitters here or there, but still here, still smiling.
Little bit of PTSD, but no, really great. So yeah, both welcome to the show. Nick, because of that background and that sort of insight that you've got, how about you kick us off? The general sense I get is that content design had this real spike in interest, probably a couple of years back now, but that interest has kind of stayed around, but it might have tailed off a little bit. So why do you think that might be the case, and how about you take us on a quick journey to the evolution of content design and what it is as a practice and how it fits into this kind of modern day content landscape?
Yeah, sure thing, Kyle. Cast your mind back, if you will, to a time when everyone had endless tabs of BuzzFeed open. I think is around the time of content design, right? Everyone was looking at the way to get more clicks, more eyeballs, and it was a time where I think everyone was really focused on the words, right? And so content design at that time was about making sure that you were curating, great words onto a page. I think there was a lot of people that would have the flash term "content was king," and I think it was really a time where people thought that if you got the right words on a page, then it was job done. Done once, let it be. And I think a bunch of years later, we realized that's simply not the case. I think people who touted content was king have kind of realized that was a fragmented time where digital was almost its own part. You had a digital strategy separate to your business strategy. You had a content strategy separate to that. I think people who said content is king would realize now content is core. And as part of that, it's encompassing everything that we do. It's all about not just the design, the words, but the entire customer experience or student experience that we're taking people on.
Yeah, there definitely was that sense that if you publish something and it was decent enough quality, you suddenly see it appear right at the top of results, regardless of your authority as a publisher. And from my own experience around those times, I was working for almost like a content farm, for a better phrase, and this website was an expert in everything. And me as a writer, I was writing about airport technology and stuff. I'm not an expert in these sort of things, but sure enough, my articles would rank at the top of Google with a little bit of playing around with some key phrases. So
right.
Very different time.
We were all trying to cheat SEO, weren't we?
Yeah, that was it. And we had all worked out. And then a lot of those sites went the way of the dinosaur. May, what's your take?
Well, I think essentially good content design is just making it super easy for users to find stuff out, get the job done on your site as quickly, as easily as possible. And visual design might bring someone in, but great content design is meant to help the user navigate their way towards the information and persuade them to take the next action. And I feel as though the content design journey in marketing, in my recent career, I think it's not a term that's really been used very much anymore because it's just become what marketing and digital teams have to do. But we started off, to Nick's point, in the start of the web area, being quite creative, unbridled, being able to just, test out with this new web medium and just go berserk. And as per the content farming, as you talked about, and then UX UI principles matured and we began to build in accessibility and user journey mapping and so on. And then we became a lot more structured, but also kind of functional and efficient. And then this started kind of the process, I suppose, that I've experienced where it became a production line with handoffs when you talk about content design. Web and UX teams to start with a wireframe, tried and true principles and templates. When completed, here you go, marketing comms, go create that content within those constraints. And I think the teams never really asked any questions about that. It was almost kind of like a formula, color by box and numbers exercise. But then we soon started to look and feel the same as everybody else in our space. And I think it was only when I took on my first role in product marketing that I really started to question this, because I was struggling with that process of content design. And the aha moment for me was that we needed to start with our story. We had to deeply understand, our reason for being, to what specific audience, who actually needed what we had to offer, who cared about the values and how we aligned. And I think the honest fact is, through my own flawed experience, a lot of us think that we do know that and that we do understand enough, but most of us skate by with just that superficial layer of understanding. It's kind of like almost a brochure version of our own story. And I think that's not enough anymore. Like 80% of the work that we do is in deeply knowing your story, almost questioning it and challenging it and being curious enough to a fault that you've tested it enough to believe it yourself above all objections that might come up. And so how does that link back to content design today? I think because content design is essentially the balance between meaning, brevity, and functionality. And when you're tasked with helping someone who probably never even heard about you before and knows nothing about you to understand maybe what you do or why you do it and compel them to kind of go further, it's inevitable that in the content design process, you're going to have to do it with 50% less content than you started with. And when you have to make those trade-offs and those cuts, you have to do it in an informed way. And you better know what you're talking about when you do that. So I think that's the shift I've seen in the journey so far.
You're making me feel nostalgic for the age of websites with like really kind of fuzzy backgrounds and stars and and hit counters at the bottom of the page. It's a very different sort of web, but it kind of reminds me of those first moments of discovering like the internet for the first time and how fun the web was. And you are right, there seems to be this evolution because we're pushing back against that chaos, weren't we? We needed that standardization and the rules of the web were born. And I've always found it quite hard to square. Well, I used to, looking at the rules of content design and government digital services, and I think these rules are very, very useful. But then you look at something like Apple and how it takes, UX and user experience, but then it adds that very powerful layer of storytelling over the top of it. It's good to see the art copyright of the web still alive, but you are right, it is like a spectrum. And I remember when I was working for universities in higher ed, we did a lot of kind of different creative and advertising, and often writing like a very clear message on creative, like Book and Open Day, was far more successful than some sort of aspirational beautiful piece of written copy, because a user just wants to get things done. And it's never just one way or the other. There's often a balance, but it is deciding like what is the best thing for the user at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a struggle, right? It's that balance that it's the art and the science together.
Indeed. So let's open this out a little bit. I think as a form, there's so many different definitions about different content professions and ways of framing how we approach this problem of content and what it should be and how we should create the best kind of content for users. So let's go through a few myths around content design and what it isn't. So May, what sort of springs to your mind when someone's talking about content design and then the general understanding of content design and how that general understanding might not quite be accurate? What really stands out for you?
Probably kind of three things come up in terms of maybe the myth busting of conventional thought, right? One is design comes first and then content. To my point earlier, I think both the person or the team responsible for the user experience on the site, as well as the content creation owner, kind of need to have that same deep understanding of what your DNA is, what you're meant to be saying, to the same level. I think it used to be one person would own that the other person would just go, my job is just to fill in the box. So I think it's more of a collaborative process now with equal understanding from zero to hero, not a production line. The other myth probably is, you can outsource content design. And I think it still happens, and it's probably degrees, right? But in reality, if you've ever kind of outsourced content design to an agency, or even maybe team members who have a lighter touch understanding of what you offer, you remember how inefficient and painful that process is to have to keep going back and reiterating everything and correcting everything. And I think lastly for me, it's about being a bit more militant. The myth around being militant with word count, that's always the struggle. Brevity absolutely matters, but not at the cost of understanding. And I think the best sites that I've been on take a little bit more time to explain exactly what you need to understand. So I think sometimes you need maybe another 10 words, and that's okay. So those are the three myths for me.
What about you, Nick?
Let's see if I can give a top three here. I think the first one for me is that content design is a one-time task, right? Once upon a time, you'd throw some copy on a website, it's done. But I think we're far more attuned to the fact that that content is part of a continuous and iterative improvement that we have to do, right? We need to understand how that user's consuming that information. Obviously, context changes over time. And I think that if you're putting content online and not using insights, not using analytics to kind of understand how that content is operating as part of the broader experience, you're probably only doing half your job. So that's the first one for me. The second one, I think, is that content design isn't just about making things look pretty, and it's just not about copywriting. Like most people think that they're the two kind of basic principles of a website. Make it look nice, put the right words on there, and you're done. I think that the evolution, especially in higher education, of websites has changed a lot. Once upon a time, it was about just getting something on there, having a digital presence. But organizations, higher education now, especially when we're looking at international students and we're looking at attracting those top students into higher education institutions, are really trying to do more. And I think it's about sharing the voice of student, whether that's prospective, current, or alumni. I think it's absolutely a tool when it comes to acquisition and recruitment. So it becomes a business tool, and it's actually a really critical part in that student journey, not just from kind of application, but right through to alumni. So I think that mindset has changed around what the role of the website is, and just making it look pretty and just kind of throwing some words on isn't enough. You need to understand the role that it plays in student experience more broadly. And I think probably the other one is that content design is only for digital platforms, right? Like in the same vein that we need to understand the entire student experience and the fact that that website can be used for multiple causes, we probably need to understand as well that that student has multiple touch points with the university brand. And so content design sitting on itself on a website isn't enough. You need to really stitch together that messaging, that strategy, that overall experience to make sure that what a student might be seeing on maybe a digital ad lines up with what they're seeing on the website, then lines up what they're seeing, maybe on a campus screen or somewhere else in that student experience on the way through. We really need to stitch all of those parts of content design together and really reinforce that messaging.
I loved your point about the evaluation of performance of these sort of things. So quite often when we publish digital content, there's normally like a flag set. So to review this in X number of months time or whatever it is. And, actually, I think there probably needs to be almost like a phase before that, just a kind of a general sort of check-in, or almost like in-flight check, if you like, to see if it initially is resonating. Can you kind of interject any earlier? And often with content campaigns, that sort of early stage looking for like positive signals is often missed, and we then go to the retrospective review and we miss the opportunity to kind of improve as we go along. And May, your point about collaboration as well, this is actually something, moving away from that production line and passing off to teams as like a checkpoint is a very hard habit to shift. And actually at times when you're doing proper content design, it's a collaborative process. So you're literally sitting in the same room or on the same Teams call as like your subject area expert, aren't you?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're crafting this piece together, and that can be a deeply uncomfortable experience, especially for a
very
writer.
uncomfortable.
Yeah, very.
The fact that you keep having to do it probably 6 to 10 times before you actually arrive somewhere you can agree on.
Yeah, and it's quite an intense process as well. But from working in teams in the past, it's like a muscle, isn't it? It gets easier over time. But yeah, if you're going to get the best results out of these things, you generally have to collaborate on producing that content. It isn't a first draft check off sort of thing. It's like this evolving process together, isn't it?
And look, I think it involves tough conversations too, right? Like, we know what universities are like, big, complex organization, lots of people who really are passionate about what they do, and quite often believe that it's the most important thing that the university is doing at that time, right? And so quite often you have maybe one website, maybe 100 websites, all with different messaging, all with different parts of a content experience. And I think sometimes we need to, as digital marketers, as content professionals, have tough conversations with academics, right? Sorry, this particular piece of research, this finding isn't actually the most important thing in the hierarchy of the entire website. Let's find a way to get it to the right people. Let's make sure that those people who this really matters to get the information. But sometimes having those tough conversations, both in a collaborative sense, but also, why put stuff on a website if no one's going to look at it? Why put something on a website if it's just going to be there for presence? Like, we have a real role, I believe, to be constantly reviewing the content that we put on the websites and challenging ourselves to why it should be there in the first place. Every experience, every piece of content we put online should play a role in the core purpose of that site. And there can be multiple purposes, don't get me wrong, but you need to know why that content's there and the best way you can use it and who it's targeted at.
So, like, building off that, last month we were speaking about generative AI as a way to improve content production. You gave an example there of like taking a piece of academic content and rethinking how it's presented for audiences. How do you think generative AI can like be a tool that's added into that process? What are you seeing like higher providers doing now with that technology, and is it making that content design process easier, or is it adding like another kind of spanner into the works, more friction?
So I don't know. I mean, I might be the unpopular one in the room on this one, but I think that digital people are really good at creating hype around things, right? How long ago was it? Last year we were talking about how we'll all be learning from a metaverse within 18 months and whatever the thing was before that. Like, these things play a role. Don't get me wrong. But as marketers, and ultimately we're all marketers, whether it's through content design, experience, even in development now on the technical side. And that's a craft, right? Not anyone can just write content. I used to be a radio copywriter, and you would see the difference between a fantastic radio ad and someone just putting words on a page, right? Yeah. The engagement, the entertainment, the memory hold on what you're creating with that content. And so for me, AI plays an assistant role, right? Content is a craft, and you need people who know stories, who understand your audience or your students or whoever you're targeting. AI can play a really good role there. And I think maybe where it plays the most powerful role is in the ability to create content in multiple variations and formats, right? So we might create some content online, but if we're trying to be accessible, if we're trying to meet people on the way that they learn or they consume content, we might have a text version that we build and then use Gen AI to create a video version, or to create something that can sit on social, or to create an audio version that people can consume and listen while they're driving or, commuting or something like that. So to me, at the core, our craft still stands. We need people to write the stories, to really make beautiful content design. But I think Gen AI plays an awesome role at being able to kind of make that multi-platform or multi-format.
That's a really good take. I've noticed loads of generative AI tools now dropping in all kinds of different mediums. I can't remember the exact name for it. I think it's called video or something like that. And it essentially takes like a conversation like this one or a piece of text or whatever it is, and it will transform it into a video. What more, intercut like actual speakers with certain stock footage. And to be honest, at the moment, it's kind of early days and it's not quite getting there. But when you take away the idea that, well, actually, this is produced by AI, not a number of seconds, you begin to think, wow, this is actually quite impressive. So another medium which would have taken an editor a couple of hours, an hour to put together is just done in seconds. And again, on the audio front, we're all very used now to like hearing the TikTok AI voice. It's not a new thing to us. And if AI can take your voice and then transform a piece of content audio as this, it's just like a huge kind of boost to efficiency and effectiveness of getting that message out there.
I agree, Kyle. I think the challenge is that who is that convenience for? Is it for the end user or is it for us as marketers, right? We can smash that piece of content out quicker and get into our weekend or, whatever it needs to be. I think what still stands is, and you think about universities, right? We're often competing at a very similar level. Universities are all doing very similar things. What is your point of difference? What's your edge, right? And do you want to leave that experience part of being part of a university up to Gen AI to create, a fake stock image or even just a stock image of kind of your experience? I think that's kind of where we need to draw the line sometimes on what's an authentic experience. And let's be honest, like we've got savvy students. They understand what's happening here. And if we're trying to create an authentic version of our university experience, I don't think anything beats, and maybe call me a little bit old school, but your students in photos, in situ on these campuses, or in situ learning, or whatever it needs to be. I think, again, it plays a role, but if we're creating authentic stories, we need to understand that that's that craft, and we don't want to kind of discount that to Gen AI, which may create a really beautiful photo, but is it going to be the photo of your actual of your campus, of your university, of your students, in play?
May, some mild shots there fired at marketing. Care to respond?
Well, I think marketing content comms teams have so much thrown at them today. Like, they're probably at the tip of the spear, I would say, in terms of having to react and respond really, really quickly. So there's no shame in using AI as your assistant. Gosh, especially if it costs you $20 a month or even free. But to that point of what Nick was saying, I think it's absolutely spot on. Assisting is different from replacing. And I think we have to be careful that convenience doesn't come at the cost of doing the hard work to really understand what your differentiation points are and why it matters to your end user or end customer, student, alumni, audience, whomever, even staff, right? So I think just as our colleagues' advice on the previous search-based AI question that you asked them in the previous podcast, I think the key thing here is to test and learn and just use it in different ways, use it in different contexts to understand how it adds value to your end user, to your customer, how it adds value to your teams. Because I think in this era, I think of talent shortage or having to do a lot more with less, particularly in the higher education space, there's nothing more soul destroying for somebody in your team to do things that don't work, don't have an impact, take too long, and is never seen or never used, right? So I think it's continuing to explore different ways that you can actually make your teams better at what they're doing so that the customer student experience is stronger. And if AI plays a part in that, then great, but you got to test it and use it to figure out where it lands.
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to a few content designers recently about how they're integrating it. And typically they use it as an accessibility checker, or they might use it as a quick way to perhaps make something more concise. So they still have the profession and the scope to ask those right questions and how to get the result, but they're using it to kind of cut down their production time. So yeah, 100%, it's an assistant at this point. Nick, I'm conscious I want to open this out to talk about some universities that are absolutely killing it in this space and doing good work. And the trouble is, you often hear about case studies in like content marketing. It gets like this massive spotlight. And if you look at like Google Trends, content marketing goes like this, and content design does a bit more of a kind of like a wavy form at the bottom. So from your experience and universities that you've come across, who would you shine an example on as a university that's getting content design right and making quite big strides in that area?
Yeah, it's a super question, hey, and I think a lot of universities are sitting in two camps, not just in the UK, but quite globally. There's the traditional kind of structure where you've got an IT shop and a marketing shop, and someone kind of half owns the website, and it's kind of more technology than it is actual kind of tool. And then you see the immersion of these universities that are really coming through, that are looking at things differently. They're looking at the university website almost with that kind of private sector lens, right? And taking on a digital experience mindset in the way they create that. And to me, they are the ones that are really starting to set the strides apart. They're understanding the difference in content design. They're understanding the role of the website as part of an integrated marketing strategy or an integrated student experience. And they are not just creating great digital experiences, but they're creating great experiences within the university. They're breaking down the silos that exist around faculties, around kind of specializations like marketing and technology, and really unifying together. One that's getting me really excited at the moment. So Ash Roots, who is over at the University of Exeter, I am super excited about what they're doing with digital strategy at the moment. If you haven't done so yet, go and have a look at the digital strategy for the University of Exeter. It is really throwing on its head the way that you approach digital within a university, the way they're being collaborative, they're co-designing with industry, they're bringing in people for workshops. It's quite transformative, and I think the way that they're presenting that and the way that you see this unified team coming together, like they've never been more excited about creating great digital experiences and amazing content. And so that to me is they're clearly working through it at the moment, but just taking a look at the way that they've approached their strategy, there are great things to come at Exeter. Another one where I see like that transformative mindset at play is UAL. So UAL have brought on Chris Condon and also Lloyd Shepherd from the BBC to really take on their digital kind of strategy. And so when we talk about the value of content and stories and connecting with people in a digital space, when you talk about higher education, they are leading from the forefront, right? They understand the critical role that comes to students around content consumption and perception when you are on a website or you're using a piece of marketing, maybe with influencers or someone like that. And I think the thing for them is that they are finding really interesting ways to make sure that story and content really integrate with the whole digital experience. And so bringing content-led leaders really sets a kind of a big stake around the really innovative stuff that UAL's doing online.
That's really interesting. So has Exeter got a new team in place for that, or is it sort of a new philosophy they've got going on with their existing staff?
It's a bit of both. I think it's a bit of both. They are hiring all kinds of great roles at the moment, digital service designers, a whole bunch of HCD and UX specialists. They're really looking at the website as as a service-led digital platform. And so understanding that it's not just about the words on the page, but it's about what do the words do to get you to the next step? How does that experience connect together? Where is that student, both from a personalization perspective, but also in their buyer journey, right? We all know that students are far further down the track now on what their consideration and awareness is with the universities they want to join to. We're getting into that point now with clearing just a few weeks away. And so to me, they're really thinking about the, not just kind of the heuristic design, but like that ethnographic mindset on hitting the student at the right point in their consideration journey. And that's really cool stuff. That's private sector, Sainsbury's, Nike, Apple kind of thinking.
Yeah, the your clearing point there is a good one. And you are right. I mean, the amount of information that students have access to now without having to go to a specific university's website is just astronomical. Communities, private chats, and websites that already serve those needs. And I saw a report drop the other day from, I think it was University Compare and Education Cubed, and they asked students, like, do you want more information on clearing? It's the pre-clearing survey. And most of them said, no, we're good. We're fine. We've had enough information about clearing, because it's just so ubiquitous now. And that just wasn't the case, like, 7 years ago. So yeah, that real transformation has happened. And there seems to be this sort of changing role of what a website is?
I mean, they're savvy students, right? The last one I was going to mention, and this probably actually ties in really nicely, is LSPU. So London South Bank have done huge amounts of work on their course pages and really trying to provide really interesting and relevant information, not just about the learning practice, but actually what you get at the end of that education, right? So how employable will you be? What's the kind of market going to look like? What kind of roles could you take on? And so for me, you know, that Paul Woods and Nicola Careen are really kind of driving through that as well and doing some really cool stuff. And I know that they're in the middle of a huge kind of transformation of their digital platform. But yeah, the way they're thinking is really different too.
So we've covered here like the kind of the higher ends of strategy and these kind of big transformations, and you know, hearing that the BBC, like, well, ex people from the BBC are coming into like UAL is like that's a significant strategic move to think about how content can be positioned to audiences in more kind of storytelling like fashion. May, I want to bring this into more sort of actionable and practical side, because we can't all just go out tomorrow and hire a BBC exec, unfortunately. So what would your take be on that? What do you think in terms of content design, if a team is new to sort of concept or didn't have as much resource as say someone like UAL, what practical steps could they be taking to, you know, get the most out of this practice and start to integrate it more into their workflows?
I would say maybe just some practical tips would be something that Nick talked about earlier. When you're responsible for creating the design and the content, you're almost kind of married to it and you just feel so involved and passionate, and you're like, I've spent 3 weeks working on this content and design. I want to put it all in there. I think that's the thing that you need to watch out for as a trap, because you need to assume someone's going to stop a third of the way through any page, whether it's a home page or any other page. And you just need to challenge yourself to say, was that enough? Was that enough to get them to the next step or to get them to want to discover more? So what waypoints are you creating at each third to make it easy for them to stop there and understand what they could do next? So that's just one thing. Another practical thing is, you know, language matters. And you brought up Apple earlier, and they do it really well. And for those who are wanting to kind of understand what they do, there's a great article by, I think it's Jarno Leroux on Medium, where he breaks down Apple's microcopy approach, which is gold, which is absolute gold, right? So their philosophy is in everything that you do on the site, CTAs and things like that, highlight the benefit, not the effort it takes to actually take that action. So an example for university that might be wanting to kind of get prospective students to subscribe to them, or alumni, instead of saying, you know, subscribe here, there's immediate effort required to actually do that, adds friction to somebody's brain, you know, get updates or get the latest information. So there's a little bit of, you know, the give and take, and Apple do it in the way where they say, you know, instead of saying buy the new phone now, buy new phone, a lot of change, save on the latest phone here.
Yeah.
Right. So small things like that could really add a lot of value in that practical sense.
The yeah, you mentioned the cascade down a page and actions. You prompt a memory for me. There's a fantastic book called Don't Make Me Think. It's like the kind of pivotal textbook in UX and design thinking, isn't it? And the irony is it's published in 2013, but it's still as relevant then as it is today.
Absolutely.
And it's funny you're looking through it, because some of the old diagrams in there have the kind of different icon design than iPhones and things. But yeah, the text is super relevant, and I recommend people have a look at it to see what that sort of flow of cognitive thinking does when you're looking at certain messages and language, and how some, like what you said there, they kind of put a wall up, don't they? But others invite you to kind of be more bought into it. There's a lot that goes into this sort of stuff. It's not just sort of playing around with a few words, is it?
Oh no, the amount of thinking that you have to do for one paragraph, the shorter the paragraph, the shorter the number of words you've got, the harder you have to think.
Yeah, no, I think that's accurate.
You know, I was going to say the other thing is that quite often as higher education marketers, our reference point is always other higher education websites, right? And that gets a bit stale after a while. And so I think one of the things that I could challenge marketers to do is have a think about what's same but different. When I was leading the government team in Australia, we had these service pages, and it might be something like renewing your driver's license. And I think a lot of big organizations think, let's put as much information as possible. That way, everyone's questions will be answered. And that, sometimes included the entire Driver's License Act of 1954, right? But there's better ways to do it. And so we kind of use that what's same but different approach. And just to be really, a really quick example, that government service design page actually shared a lot more with a BBC Foods page than you would think. Right. And so we started to look at the BBC Foods page around how we would actually redo service design. And when you think about it, a recipe page tells you what you're getting at the end, right? You might be baking a cake. And so it's the same as we need to get a driver's license. There's a bunch of ingredients, and it's kind of like, here are the things you're going to need before you start this process of getting a license. Where have you got to be? Is it online? Is it over the counter? Have you got to mail the DVLA? Like, what's that format? In the same way that like this is going in an oven or it's going in a fridge. And then a bit of a summary on what we're trying to do and how you're trying to cook it best. And so I challenge marketers in higher education, don't just look at other universities for what looks good. Step outside that, look over the fence. What's same but different?
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Especially now you think of a lot of websites, they really are just becoming like publications, aren't they? And that's a lot of that's been driven by like the evolution of WordPress over the years. But if you think about the sort of content experiences you have now, you're pulling in content from all over the web and all across your website. And I challenge the university to look at something like The Verge, for instance. And if you want to highlight stories in a kind of modern way, look at that homepage. It's putting in things in social media. It's putting in different kind of categories of content.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of ways you can splice it and just do it slightly differently. And if you do that, you're right. You just stick out, and it's more memorable. Then you're not just following those same sort of categories and kind of journeys that everyone else is necessarily.
We've been doing some deep dive workshops with the university, and we've been looking at travel pages and tour companies, because it's all about experience. Like, how do you take someone on experience over a period of time? And the way that they set up those stories and tell you what you're going to be doing and the points you're going to look forward to and how you're going to go through that, there's some really interesting things in that vertical. So that's really interesting. I think the other thing
I'd like to see some of your outputs on that. That sounds really cool.
Yeah. The other thing I think is really great, and again, kind of being a little bit pseudo government as we all are in higher ed, is GDS, the Government Digital Service, do some really great work around principles and service standards. And that they are the first to say that a website isn't just about information now; it's about experience and really being quite poignant in that kind of service. Google the GDS Digital Service Standard. There's 10 points there that are really great principles to sense check the way you're designing content experiences. And I think the one that for me always sticks out is, as marketers, we should be doing the hard work to make it simple for the end user, right? They're getting a million different messages thrown at them. They're probably considering 4 or 5 different universities. How can we go about making it as simple as possible for them to get the consumption of content they need? And hopefully, as part of that, us moving them through to the next step, or being able to grab their email address so that we can find really interesting ways to market to them and keep them engaged and hopefully recruiting into our universities.
And that in itself is a differentiator as well, because if I'm thinking of your clearing reference earlier, I consistently see universities running Google ads that lead through to gated content around their clearing process, which makes no sense because the content's everywhere.
Absolutely.
It can be accessed anywhere. Why would someone take the time nowadays to fill that out? It's much more useful just to be helpful and give people what they want.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing that actually applies across every sector now. The mindset of gating your content and making somebody jump through hoops and give their information, which is so precious now, to know that somebody's probably going to market to them after that. Like, oh, cringe. Let's, double barrier. But yeah, you're spot on.
Look, especially when we're doing generic marketing out, right? Like that's the thing. So we say, oh, if you'd like to look at this course, give us your details and we'll send you more information. But the information isn't about that course. It's not about that specific faculty or that experience. It's quite often just very generic university information. And what that really does is just totally disservice any of the hard work that's gone into getting that user to a website so far.
Yeah, you instantly sort of kill that relationship, don't you? When you spend so much effort and money to get them there in the first place.
Yeah.
May, I'm conscious we're approaching time here. I'd like to sort of pull this together and give us people a general overview. So almost looking ahead with content design, what do you think are where do you think it's going? Like, what do you think the next sort of iteration of it is, and what are the sort of trends we should be looking out for going forward?
I think it's interesting. I was just thinking about this, and I was actually I've got two thoughts on it. One was sparked off a conversation I had with the director of marketing at a top university today, actually. And mental health and anxiety is such a big deal with our youth today. And he was actually mentioning how it's something that we need to consider in content design. Why was he saying that? When he talked about barriers to entry, like we think about people coming to our site already knowing that they want to actually study something at your university and it's a short list. He was actually saying, based on his research, that there are so many barriers to entry that hold a prospective student from even considering a degree. There's tough economic conditions. Can they actually afford it? There's the proliferation of choice around education, online courses, micro courses, things that cost a lot less than a traditional degree. And then he was saying all those things combined actually make it a very anxious process. Like, do I even go to university? Right? And that almost becomes the first barrier you have to get across before you even make a choice of which university to go to, let alone which course or program to actually embark on. So he was talking about how he would look at shifting content design on their site to talk about how do they remove that friction and anxiety at the very top upon entry, and then create things about the course or program or university credentials way further down that journey. Right. And I think that's an interesting way to think about content design, which is very much looking at what's happening today with the student cohorts. So that was the first thing. Second thing is probably, we've all talking about AI at the moment, and we did talk about my earlier point around how we shifted from unbridled content farm creativity early on in the web era to kind of extreme functional descriptive content design formulas ending in everything almost looking very similar. Now, in a world where everything can seem similar or manufactured or maybe untrustable because it may not be authentic, it may not be real, to Nick's point earlier, don't forget how powerful emotion and storytelling is in making people believe in why they should spend their time, effort, invest in your brand, in your university, in that experience that you're offering. And I think great content design, therefore, is so much more than just words, right? It's turning user experiences into these immersive, emotional brand engagements that just compel you to prefer and be emotionally connected and create a relationship with you so that you take the action. So some things, those are the two things that I thought were interesting in terms of where it's going.
I think Miami University has been listening quite closely to what you've said, albeit in a time machine. But they've already they've kind of tapped into that idea of anxiety, and what they're doing is they're kind of reformatting their subject level communications, email focus comms, and they're integrating user-generated content. But these stories that they're sharing are from students who aren't track stars and these kind of archetypal amazing individuals. They are people who have fear, they are scared, they're anxious, and they're sharing their stories of how they feel the same way. And their open rates have gone through the roof. Their engagement is incredible. And it's just because they've changed the type of content that they're sharing in those comms. It's remarkable, really. You kind of have to kick yourself and think, oh my God, is it that simple? But they're getting results of 90% open rates on emails. It's just insane, So yeah, fair play to them. And your approach there is just completely correct. And it's definitely the way to go. Nick, what's your thoughts on the kind of future of content design and the role it plays?
I got three, Kyle. The
stuff.
first one for me, for marketers, is be friends with IT, right? Be friends with IT. The unification of lots of student systems that you're going to have, student record systems, even the parking system, so people can, kind of go into your portal and book parking or those kind of things. Those are IT-owned systems, right? And you want to be able to connect those systems into your digital experience to make your portal to your website more utility-based, so people are using it more. Because let's be honest, I hate to break it, but no one wakes up in the morning and saying, "Oh, I think I might just go onto university name website for the day and see what's going on," right? We need to take people there. We need to have experiences and utilities that make that really worthwhile. And IT have the keys to a lot of those systems. And so you're going to be thinking about integration a lot more. What information can you get from CRM, from student record systems, from student information systems to help drive better functionality and better experience? And so that's kind of that composable thought. The second one for me is, don't just think about digital as content. Think about it as experience, right? Integration, accessibility, personalization, iterating content, so having good insights and analysis tools, the overall user experience, and being able to create experiences really quickly, right? Because things will change, or you need to update something because a course is sold out or it's not selling. And so you want to be able to have tools and platforms and a mindset that thinks about all of the parts of content, not just do we tweak the words, because that's not going to get you very far.
Yeah.
And the final one for me is the number of platforms that any marketer can use is growing by the day, right? There's a new SaaS tool here, another kind of specialist tool for this. We need to pick the ones that matter are going to work for you best. Like a couple of years ago when there was like 1 million social media tools and someone said, what's our social media strategy for what's it? And everyone's like, what the hell's what's it? I've never heard of that before. So no, we've got to do that. And you would find that the actual usage of that was like 0.001% of people. Mark Ritson, who's a fantastic marketing professor, often talks about this, like, don't try and be across everything. Be across the ones that matter. And then to that point, be flexible that will probably change, right? And so having some really core platforms that embrace change, that you can swap out different tools, that you can add in new tools as they go. I mean, look, at some point, we're probably going to have hologram open days, right? Somewhere in the future, who knows? But, we're investing money in this technology and in these experiences. You want to do it in a way that allows you to embrace that change as it comes up in the right platforms.
I mean, I look at platforms like Vision Pro, and I think, right now the barrier to entry for mass market is way too high, but you can easily see how, 5-10 years time, actually experiencing an open day with that sort of quality of like vision and immersion is actually very beneficial. So you're thinking way in the future, but it's a future bet. And you're absolutely right about the gauntlet of social media. I mean, I know that we're past the golden age of like these new platforms coming to market, but it's still got momentum going. I mean, Instagram's Threads has just dropped, hasn't it? Like new kind of Twitter rival.
Yep.
Makes a bit of sense for university to have a go with that. But yeah, for me personally as a creator, I will not be jumping on that. I will just stick with the one platform, my social network, LinkedIn, and just lean into that.
I think it's pragmatism at core, right? Testing stuff and trying stuff is what marketers do. We love doing new things and trying to break the market. But I think at some point you need to understand that you're driving an enterprise experience as well. And so at the core, having really stable platforms that allow you to kind of be able to test and do really interesting stuff, but in guardrails, in brand, kind of guardrails as well, is really critical.
And I think one point beyond that as well, we've all been victim to buying the tool first and then figuring out what we do with it. So, one of the things that, and therefore, you end up dump stacking it later on, right? So one of the things that we're finding, particularly in the sectors that we operate in now, financial pressure has never been higher. The need to validate your investments and the risk and reputation that individual teams have, just in terms of their personal brand reputation, their careers, their jobs, get at risk when they make those rash decisions, sign up to a 2-year subscription for, 50, 100, 250K. and end up using 30% of its capability. One of the things that we started doing with our customers is actually helping them craft the strategy first. And that's through the deep dives that we do with our customers, because the tech comes later. Let's just figure out what you're meant to do and how you're actually going to achieve your, tech agnostic. It could be any tech that you're using, and we take that approach. We don't say only Squiz. Like, what's your entire ecosystem and how do you actually get there first? Once you do that and you get alignment across the business, sure, now you know what to invest in without risking spend, time, effort, and personal jobs when you do that. So I think that's just more of a sensible way to move forward nowadays.
I took the same approach when I took up running. So before I went out and bought the kit, I ran in my Converse for 2 weeks. And then I went out and got some running shoes and the running kit. And it's the same.
That one didn't work for me, that one.
Got the kit first. But yeah, you are right. You have to sort of have an idea of how you're going to use a platform before you integrate it. And then there's an element of discovering a platform, what it can do once you've got it in-house, something like SEMrush or whatever it is. But yeah, you are right. I don't think we pause for breath to work out what the kind of implication of something is before we get it in. And yeah, most often these kind of enterprise platforms, you barely scratch the surface on them. And it's a real shame because they are very powerful if they're used correctly.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. We've reached time, but thank you both for coming on. It's been nice to kind of put my content design hat back on and have a little look over and how things have changed over the years. So before we depart, what's the best place for people to get in touch with you and learn more?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, so I love anybody to kind of get in touch on LinkedIn. Just pop me a note, share ideas, brainstorm, anything. We're also found at squiz.net, SQIZ.net. So yeah, look forward to kind of just chin wagging.
Nice one. All right. Thanks both for coming on. Speak to you again soon.
Thanks. This was fun. Thanks, Kyle.